People are still getting used to who I am.
All right, well, we thank everybody for joining us on our Wednesday Zoom and Learn. Mary Jane's got quite a class for you guys today, and we hope that you will participate as we want it to be very interactive. And if you have questions, please ask or at least put it into the chat. Go ahead, after you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Jane. I am the Vice President of Sales for Granite Escrow and specifically for Temecula and Riverside County. I grew up in the real estate business and was an escrow officer for 20 years before I got my license and swapped out to being a broker. And for 20 years, I've been a managing broker. Because I got into the business right after high school, next month will be my 40th year. I mean, next month, yeah, in September, will be my 40th year in the business. So I've done a little bit of everything. And so I like to take a little time at the beginning of these classes, as you guys are getting used to me, to understand that I kind of wander between how to really support you guys at the with that broker level knowledge and deliver in the escrow level, and really have solutions for you. So today, when we plan these classes for you, we try to go back and forth, at least I do, as far as if it's super complicated. Last week, I tried to go lighter this week. And so this week we're going to talk about just back to basic stuff, things that some people know automatically and do all the time, and other things that maybe I'll surprise you with. So we are going to do a back to basics class. I made a little list of the things that I always tell new agents, or little bits of wisdom that I've gathered over time, these things. And so when I made the list, I decided to just go alphabetical. So the list that I'm starting with, we're gonna start with adding or removing a buyer or a seller from a transaction. Back in the day, we used a straight addendum to add or subtract somebody from the transaction, practically a single line. A few years ago, CAR came up with the AOAA form, the assignment form, and it covers a lot of the things that people didn't know about assignments. One of them is that the person being excused from the transaction is actually not excused from performance, meaning that even though they've been eliminated from the transaction, they did sign the contract, and that doesn't eliminate their obligation to wrap the transaction up smoothly, even if it has to cancel. So one of the things that really surprises agents, I probably have this conversation at least 30 times a year, is why does my client have to sign the entire file top to bottom? In my escrow days, we got this request so often to avoid re-signing things that as a courtesy, escrow started adding language in that said, you've read everything and seen the disclosures. And we do that to be supportive and to be helpful of you, but that's not going to be enough when you get to court and they say they didn't see the TDS, or they didn't see the preliminary title report or whatever. So the AOAA form has quite a bit in it. In fact, I wanted to show you guys these two books. I keep these two books on my desk all the time. One of them is let's see if I can get it there, the samples forms book from CAR. Every single form that CAR has is in there, and I can follow along while you're typing or writing something so that I can be supportive and be right there with you. The other one is the California Purchase Agreement book that literally has an explanation paragraph by paragraph for everything regarding the purchase contract. I use this book more to prove something to someone than I do for my own. You will even find that I have pages torn out and put back where they belong because I have to scan them and show them to people. So it's a very handy couple of books that I keep on my desk. So when removing a buyer, although they will stop signing for escrow, they should continue signing for the real estate file so that neither party could say to you that they became uninformed and are unable to, and were not aware that they had those duties anymore. And for those of you taking notes, I just wanted to give you that paragraph 5 and 8 in the AOAA is where it says that they are not being excused. Now, this was always true of assignments, even when we didn't have a form, nobody knew it. So escrow officers knew it, and they would behave in a way that would indicate that we're still giving knowledge to the person.
And Mary Jane's freezing. So while we wait for her to come back, again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat,
File,
and we'll get
and
those.
Unfortunately, most transaction coordinators know. You have a question, Tom?
No, you froze there for a minute, so I was just letting everybody know while you were frozen that if there were any questions, they could just leave it in the chat, or take yourself off mute and pipe in at any time.
So for adding or subtracting a seller or buyer, be prepared for continuing signatures to be needed all the way through to the end of the file. The most frustrating one of those is, of course, when somebody is not on the loan and they just want to be on title. I still have to disclose to them 100%. So hopefully that will save you the difficult conversation when somebody gets added. It just simply has to be done.
Hi, Mary Jane. Really quick question.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service for the last 40 years. I'm curious, over the last 40 years, how often or how many times, I'm hoping it's less than on one hand, that you've had challenges from the signers, meaning the legal battles, etc.
On the on the broker side, almost never, because we know we get the signatures. On the escrow side, pretty often, because that's where the money is handled. And that's usually what will light a fuse faster than anything, is trouble on the money. So somebody didn't get what they thought they were going to get. Because escrow takes instructions, they often are excused from these arguments and they land back in your lap. So so to answer your question, not as often as a broker side, and more often due to money on the escrow side.
Would you agree that we probably see less of that happening even on the escrow side post-TRID guidelines than we did prior to TRID coming out a few years ago, right?
Yes.
Now that everything has to be disclosed, you have your closing disclosures with your financials on it that have to balance, things like that. We're obviously going to see a lot less of the numbers being off as we would have in the past before, things could have been hidden on page 68, right?
Hey, the only exception, I'd agree with you, Tommy, but the only exception to that being that we're getting a ton. Up until last Friday, I was hearing that most of our over asking offers, the appraisals were going very well, that the market was absorbing that very well. Friday, I don't know what happened Friday, but I heard at least 6 transactions went into as much as $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in shortages. At that time, to put the deal back together, we're giving up a lot. We're going to give up pest control. We're going to give up repairs. We're going to give up credits. So at that time, it does have to be redisclosed and all that, but that will cause an emotional reaction. Again, that's just a current trend because of the short market.
Right.
I wanted to, if no one else has a question about that one, I'm going to go on to adding credits during escrow. As a real estate, the number one thing that happens in escrow is you guys will call in a credit. We will type it all up, fix the HUD, and shoot it over to the lender, and then the lender will tell us that they can't accept that credit. It either exceeds the limit, or the limit's been used up already by some other things. So a lot of loans have lender credits in them, and you may not even be aware of it. So you will have a 2-week argument over the pool and come up with a $10,000 or $12,000 credit, and there's no way to receive it. So when on the buyer side you accept the credit, your first call before you okay and sign for that credit and wrap it up is to make sure that that credit is going to be allowed in the transaction. And I did mention big money on this one, the big credits, but honestly, as a broker, sit down at my desk and argue over $150. it becomes a pride thing almost for buyers and sellers at that point. They demanded that money, they got it, they want it, and I have nowhere to give it.
Well,
The
especially
next thing that happens after
from,
that is the agent wants to write a check, and I can't get that to happen.
yeah, normally that you know, that pride factor hits on the seller side, right? Seller feels, I've given you everything you want, I'm not giving you another 150. Now you're probably seeing a little bit more on the buyer side this time of season right now, when offers are coming in so high over asking price because of lack of inventory, et cetera. You're probably getting that little bit of pride factor from the buyer side saying, wait a minute, I just gave you X over your asking price.
We had, the one I'm thinking of in particular was a $10,000 pool credit that they really fought over, and the escrow was running way very late. And then it was discovered the credit could not be accepted. One of the things escrow can do for you is, because the seller's allowed to pay anything off their side of the HUD that they want to pay, we asked for the seller to take back the $10,000 and pay the pool company. And at that point, the seller said, absolutely not. I will, if you can't accept the credit, then it's in my best interest to turn it down, not to support your ability to take $10,000 off me. So it's very important that you be sure where you're going to receive your credits when you get them, large or small. Any thoughts before I move on?
No, I think the thing that hit home right there was, anytime credits come into play, you got to make sure that it's cleared through the lender, because you guys can negotiate for days and days on this credit, all of a sudden come to a conclusion for a lender to say, we can't do that. And it was all for nothing, right? So you got to make sure you're including your lender in those discussions of be like, hey, here's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to solve for X. If I'm able to do X and Y, is that good with you? And then that will definitely help with your negotiations going one direction versus going back and forth.
We had a transaction last year where the patio cover was taken down without the buyer knowing it was going to be done. It became a termite issue, and when he went to the walkthrough, a 30-foot patio cover that was rusted and falling apart and probably wasn't worth $500 was gone, and he demanded $3,000 to $5,000 from the agent because the agent authorized the removal of it, because he happened to be there when the appraisal was. Before we even negotiated, I called the lender and I said, how much credit do we have left? They said $2,300. So when I called the client back, I said, I have $2,300 that you can accept, and that's all. And that's what we settled on. So knowing that I could find out how much credit I had left kept me from having a $5,000 argument that I didn't want to have in the first place. So it's very important. This next one's coming up super easy. Backdating and correcting.
Real quick before you go on, I think I saw somebody on chat asked, why would a lender not accept a credit?
It exceeds the legal limits of the loan. Most loans have a limit of 3 or 6% total credits that can go through the file. And if it exceeds that limit, it literally cannot be in the transaction. I don't have the paragraph in front of me, but if you want me to get it for you, as escrow officers, we've known this all along. As real estate agents, we did it. And so just like 2 years ago, they finally added a sentence that said, seller, if the credit exceeds, the seller has no obligation to give it to you. So it's now in the purchase contract, but there are legal limits for certain types of loan products. It is normally 3 or 6%.
Correct.
Tommy, do I have something else in the chat?
No, that was the only thing so far.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure you guys know how to make a correction on the spot. If you want to if you need to make correction on the spot, you strike the offending issue, whether it's a single letter on somebody's middle initial or something, or a whole paragraph. You strike it, but you do not black it out or white it out. It has to still be visible. The correct method for correcting a real estate document on the fly, whether you're doing it in a computer program or by hand, is to strike the offending item, write in the new item, and have everyone initial it. So if you're on the fly, that's a very quick way, because people will think they need to go retype something, or you're standing in the driveway and we all of a sudden remembered something and you need to make a quick correction, do never, ever black out or white out documents. Strike, correct, initial.
Yeah, we see that a lot with names and stuff. Either it was misspelled or maybe husband and wife have two separate last names and it was put into the document the same, etc.
Backdating. So you, as a listing agent, you've written the offers come in and you've written a counter and you did not sign the original purchase contract, you just countered. Now the deal's been accepted and you're going to go back and sign the original contract. Do not backdate to match the date on the counteroffer. You should always date the actual date the person signed. And the reason for this is, it's one of the fundamental things they teach us in escrow is, we don't know what's going to save you when the time comes. So if it gets backdated to match the counteroffer and it would have benefited you or it hurt you for the real date not to be there, I can only tell you that there are things in my heart that I know that if I ever was on a stand with a judge, I would be able to say that never happened on my watch. And so it just, and that's another thing I want to talk about. Once you say you always do something or never do something, they can stop the whole case and go subpoena all your files and look and see if you've been doing that or haven't been doing that. So just because they didn't detect it this time doesn't mean they won't detect it on a review of your entire file history. A lender a few years ago was sued over a completely different matter, and when they subpoenaed his files, they found that he had been doing felonies by giving credits that weren't allowed to be given over and over again. And unrelated to the lawsuit, he got 12 felonies handed to him from the review of his past history of the files that had nothing to do with the lawsuit he was involved in. So don't backdate, just date whatever day it is. Now, I know all my TCs out there are saying, does that affect this acceptance? No, it went to acceptance on the counteroffer just per the date. And if you had to say that it was signed later, that would be the accurate truth over backdating. Don't backdate. Okay. Any comments about that before I move on? Tommy, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I think, you know, most of the documentation and stuff for contracts is all done electronically now, majority of it. Although there are some electronic programs where you can allow a signature and it doesn't automatically post the date. I would highly recommend that any electronic signatures that are done, as soon as the signature is signed on that electronic document and accepted as a signature, it automatically dates and times it. Because then you don't have to worry about it, it's just done.
As long as we're talking about acceptance, I didn't have this in the class, but I want to add this thought. If it turns out that acceptance is confused for some reason, the agents can't agree that backdating was a bad idea, acceptance can be restated. You can literally say, okay, we're done arguing about this as of today or as of yesterday, per an addendum, here is that is our acceptance date. Because we live and breathe acceptance dates, we forget that they're an agreed to matter and they can be agreed to again. I have an excellent example of this is multiple counteroffers where box 8 did not get signed. And now the actual acceptance date, because box 8 just got signed, is now 2 days further away than what they thought they started. If this benefits or hurts somebody to the point where it has to be restated, you can do an amendment and restate acceptance.
Right, as long as buyer and seller agree.
Right. It can be agreed to. Acceptance can be moved. Similar to when a deal cancels and comes back to life, and we all have to decide what the new acceptance date is. I want to talk about dual agency for a second. I'm moving on to dual agency. We're down to D now, so we're moving along. very often agents who have one side of the transaction are being compensated will offer to do the other side at no cost or low cost for the benefit of the entire transaction. My first thought about that is that it is uncompensated risk and unnecessary to do, and you can use a seller or a buyer non-agency agreement and not have to assume the responsibility for somebody, especially in the case of a physical. You have no idea how he came to the conclusions he came to. You didn't walk him through the decisions. So the first thing I want to say about dual agency is not taking on uncompensated risk for the benefit of the transaction. You can still use your car documents. You can still provide them. You can, because you want your file to look good. You still want to hit all your marks. You just don't have to take full responsibility for a party uncompensated. But what I really wanted to talk about is even when you're compensated, you must be as hard on yourself as you would have been on the other agent. It is very common for a dual agent to know what's going on with the loan and therefore let the contingency run and fail to do their duty to serve a notice of perform and to keep the seller informed, and therefore taking risks that the seller did not agree to. So I want to remind you that when you do dual agency, to be as hard on yourself as you would have been. Yes, does that mean typing up a notice of perform, having it signed, and shoot it to yourself in your email so that it's in your records? Yeah, that's what it means. Okay, so when you're dual agency, remember you doubled the risk, not shortened the risk. It is nice to know what's going on both sides, and there's certainly an opportunity to make more money, and I'm all for that. I would never. There are some states that don't allow dual agency, but I would never. We would pick it before we'd let that happen in California. So I'm not against dual agency, but please remember to not take uncompensated risk and to be as hard on yourself.
Let me just pipe in real quick, because I know we do have some new agents on the Zoom today. Let's explain dual agency real quick. Dual agency can be numerous things. It could be the agent is representing both sides. It can be that the broker that agent is licensed under, the broker is also, say, the lender, right? And then they have to disclose that the brokerage has ties, a dual agency between the lender and the real estate agency. It can also be the broker owns the in-house escrow that they are using, and they have to disclose that they have dual agency between escrow and the agent, etc. And this has come up a lot, really. This is a good topic because this has come up a lot in the last few months. It almost seems like brokers are coming out of the woodwork to become lenders, and they're not disclosing up front because the agent is not aware or knowledgeable enough, and the broker, for whatever reason, doesn't instruct them. And the dual agency is not listed, meaning they didn't give the dual agency form stating that the broker is also the lender. And then all of a sudden the transaction becomes a nightmare, takes longer than normal to do, and then at the very end, they're asking for the dual agency to be signed so that their file is complete. There's just a lot of stuff going on.
And one short example, Tommy hit ones I wouldn't have. Thank you for remembering those. But sometimes they both work for Century 21. They both work for Allison James. They both work for Prudential, whoever. So
two separate agents.
It could be in two different branches. One
right.
in San Diego and one up here, but there is still a dual agency.
Still owned by the parent company. You have to disclose it, right? It's crazy because, I was on a file that was really ugly that just closed not too long ago. And they're arguing after the file's already closed of getting this dual agency signed. Now the seller, this was the buyer coming in, right? The seller had no idea that the lender was also the broker of the agent. And so when that file was a nightmare, the seller was like, we're done, we're closed, I got paid, I'm not signing anything. Well, now their file will not be complete. You know, if anything were to ever happen, they're kind of, pardon my friends, up shit creek without a paddle. But
That's a backdate too.
yeah.
I'm going to move on to a very simple one, keys before close of escrow. I cannot still believe this happens. You know, as a broker 10 times a year, I get a call from the seller who went back to get one last thing and the buyer's in the property and it's not closed. The moving truck's there, stuff's in the garage. If that house burns down, and by the way, one of the fundamental things they teach you in escrow is we presume it's going to burn down. We don't think it's not going to. We presume it is, that it is literally going to disappear. So if somebody causes that, you are going to get a massive lawsuit. And I want you to know that when the judge factors complete loss of a property, either on a fire or by malfeasance that you somehow cheated him out of the transaction, they figure profit over 30 years. They do not just factor, because that's the life of a loan. They do not just factor what was lost today. They factor what's called loss of profit. And they will factor that in as well. So those numbers just go right through the roof. I'd like to talk very briefly. Tommy, I'd like to do another class on notice to performs specifically. As I
no, let's actually jump into it a little bit here though as well.
Yeah,
not only notice to perform, but notice to close, if you would.
Okay, let me make a note. So I was around in January 2002 and teaching the contract when we switched off a passive system of removing contingencies and went to the active method, which means we actually say if we're in or out with those contingency forms. The notice to perform was intended to be a broom, not a stick. So if you serve your notice to performs on time, and if you tell the people up front that, in fact, I created a line for my agents. The language that I'd like you to add to your counter offers is that your broker requires timely service of notice to performs, because there are so many hurt feelings when it gets served. How dare you? I can't believe you did. I told you yesterday that we would this, that, and the other. When you are representing one party or the other and you don't serve your notice to performs on time, you have failed in the contractual obligation to take care of that, client. One of my agents, probably 10, 15 years ago, who was just determined that notice to performs get done all the time, and he was just rigid about it. And I actually didn't agree with her at first. I actually felt she was harsh about it. And so we wound up discussing it many times. In fact, last year we finally got together and wrote a class, and we titled it, "It's Not You, It's Me." Sort of like the dating joke when you break up with somebody. Until that contingency removal comes in, you're just dating them. You're not engaged to them. So it's very important that those notice to performs not be taken when you receive one as some insult, and actually that these are the broom that keep the transaction tidy. So I've had this discussion so many times, and really important agents and large people who've been in the business a long time tell me that they feel that's their last straw when they really can't get somebody to move along, and they want to save it for that right moment. That's still up to you and your transaction and your client's transaction, but please do not fear them or avoid them. Notice to performs are there for their tool in your tool belt.
I've seen a couple times, some agents or their transaction coordinator, et cetera, will send out an email, right? That says, hey, we're opening escrow. They send it to escrow. And in that email, it gives a timeline. It's a standardized timeline. They just change the data in it each time. And I've seen in there where it says, opening of escrow is this date, close of escrow is this date, contingency removal 1 is this date, and then next to that it says dash, notice to perform will be issued at close of business, and then contingency number 2 is this date dash notice perform will be issued at close of business. So they're already telling them up front, like, listen, here's the dates that you need to stick to. If you don't, we will be sending a notice to perform. Like it's just an outline. So it's almost kind of like painting the picture in advance to make that, a little bit less abrasive.
And I want to separate what your client does from what you do. So you do what you have to do contractually, and your client can still wait. They can still not cancel. They can still give them more time. They can, I'll call today and say it expired last night at midnight. All right, we'll wait till 5 today and call them and see how it is. So I want to separate what your duties are from this client's opportunity to make any decision they want. The most common thing I see in the loss or the potential when a seller can't get a deposit is that the notice to perform was never served. And without that, you have eliminated the seller's opportunity to collect on the.
And I'm going to give you a scenario because this has come up. There's back and forth. You get to the end of the contract, they give an extension, you get to the end of the extension, and they gave a notice to close. But then, don't they have to give the notice perform first before they can give that notice to close?
You only use a demand to close escrow if your contingencies have been removed. And again, it's going to give them 3 days. So depending on which side of the file I'm on, and how good you've been at serving me things, I will tell a client, yeah, we can hold on because by the time we get the notice demand to close, I've got 3 more days. So, and you can serve a notice, a demand to close 2 days earlier than close of escrow. They just have to have 3 days to close. So if you need to serve the demand to close escrow.
So did you just say on there, if all contingencies have been removed, and you're at the end of your date, you don't have to issue a notice to perform. You can just go to demand to close?
Yep. Once if contingencies are removed, you're straight to demand to close escrow. There's no longer anything to remove for the contingencies, and now we're demanding close. Again, the client will have the opportunity to decide if he wants to slam the door on Friday or wait till Monday. There will still be opportunity for the client to decide what's right for them, but you should make sure that they have their rights where they should be so that you're doing a good job for them.
Cool.
So this next subject would normally be something that we would talk about in a less serious way, but this next one I want to talk about is rent backs, occupancies before close of escrow, and tenants right now. I don't know if you're aware, but in San Diego, and I've got the news story for you, if you put it in the chat or ask me to send it to you, I'll send it to you. A seller was renting back for a month, perfectly standard. We all do it all the time. Got COVID, will not exit the home. It's been more than 6 months now, and the buyer is paying a $4,000 mortgage, and he paid $15,000 over asking to get that house. And there are no eviction courts right now. It literally could be 2 years from start to finish to exit a client from the home. Rent backs, every time somebody speaks to me about it, I just go, is there any other way? Is there literally any other way that we can get them out? Can we release part of the deposit and have them go to a hotel? Rent backs are just dangerous, dangerous territory right now.
They're dangerous territory even when it's non-COVID. I mean, there's always that possibility that they don't leave, and then you got to go through an eviction process.
Except that in 40 years, I have rarely seen, I've seen them, the truck pull up and they're supposed to be out at noon and they don't get out till 6 at night, and I get the phone calls for the entire 6 hours that the people are sitting on the curb annoyed that they can't get in the house that they should have had at noon. So those kinds of arguments happen quite a bit. But you literally have no way to evict a tenant at this time at all. And John Giardinelli, our local board attorney, has said, and I said this in a recent class, that it is the courts are going to come back in this manner, in this order: criminal, then bankruptcy, tenants and small claims are going to be the very last, among the very last cases they hear, and then and bankruptcies are going to go through the roof as well. So although we did get a happy report on Friday that not as many people took forbearance.
What people don't understand too is when you look at the counties, like take San Diego County or even Riverside County as a whole, and how many eviction, how many judges there are on staff that handle the eviction court. People think, oh, there's tons. There's not. It's kind of like probate. Like Riverside County has 3 probate judges. You know, San Diego I think has 2. You know, when you look at how many there potentially can be, it's going to be backlogged for a long time.
Most of these go through those 1 or 2 days. Most of these go through, but I would be derelict if I did not tell you at this time that you are in dangerous territory with a rent back. And frankly, with the loan market the way it is right now, the same goes for occupying before close of escrow as well. You're going to get a client in there and they're not going to be able to close, and you're not going to be able to evict them. All they have to say is they have a fever and it's on.
Yeah. And let me reiterate from the title side of the business. It's not closed until it has recorded closed, right? Like people go, oh yeah, it recorded today. Yeah, but we don't have confirmation yet. And until we have confirmation, it hasn't closed. Anything can happen. It can be pulled. They can see something wrong in the documentation. And I've seen too many times where, you know, people show up with a moving truck at 11, they allow them to start moving in with the notion that we've recorded, but no confirmation. Then all of a sudden the confirmation's pulled.
Let me give you an example that they teach escrow officers early on. So everything went well and we sent it down for recording, and it actually did record. But on that same day, the house burnt down, and the house burnt down around 4 o'clock. We're literally going to go to the title company and look and see which time the deed recorded to find out whose house burnt down.
Yeah.
Because if it was before the recording happened at noon and we didn't record till 4, the seller's house burnt down. If it happened at 5 and we recorded at 4, the buyer's house burned down. So that's how specific recording can get when it's important. That's why there's a timestamp.
Mary Jane, I have a question.
Yeah.
And also I want to say, I've seen that happen too. I saw a house flood and nobody knew what time the house flooded. So they didn't know whose insurance was liable. In the end, they split it. But going back to what you're saying about the rent backs, are you seeing this issue even if they're doing a 29-day or less rent back, or are you referring specifically just to the 30-day or more?
I can 0 rent back. That's how much rent back I want. 0
Really?
rent back. No
So
rent
you're saying
back.
even with the...
But it is, I'd like to believe it's that those 1 and 2s and 3 days are, and we're having to agree to them because of the price terms and things that are going on in the market right now. So I can't say you're not going to have one. I'm just saying that if it's something like the client needs money to move or something, come up with a better solution to release the deposit or something over keeping them in that house after close of escrow.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. And I actually had.
I want to really briefly talk up just because you brought up that flood situation. By the way, that would be a shared insurance claim because we don't know what time the flood happened. Both people would file, and the attorneys and the representatives from the insurance companies would come to their own conclusions as to whose damage is what. Did you have another thought that I interrupted?
Yeah, they ended up splitting it 50-50, just like you're saying. There was nothing really else they could agree to make everybody happy. Originally I raised my hand because I wanted to ask you. Now I had a situation last December where we served the demand to close, with sort of that expectation that at least it would have been served if we needed it, but the seller really wanted to give them some time if they needed to. But the attorney told me that that document is considered to expire after a certain amount of time if you don't act on it, but he didn't specify sort of what time frame. So what are you seeing, or what are
you're going to laugh when I tell you this, but you're going to hear me say it over and over again. Attorneys don't practice real estate. And when, as a broker, somebody quotes like that, if I had gotten that quote, I need to get them on the phone. Because, and in fact, when anyone threatens me with an attorney, I say, can you speed it up? Because I often can appeal to a more reasonable mind than I have right this second, or I can fix the bad news that they're giving somebody. Cars purchase contract. Legally, silence means silence. It does not mean anything at all. It does not mean that we gave them more time. It doesn't mean that we didn't give them more time. If nothing is happening, nothing is happening. And you have to pick it up where you left off. Which is why if you let a notice to perform go very much longer after it should have been performed on, and I don't want to use expired, that it should have been performed on, CAR recommends you reserve. To set that time in motion again.
That's what the attorney said.
If your notice performs start to expire or are drawn incorrectly, I want to talk about that just really briefly. Listing agents in their temper tantrum will sometimes write 1 day when the purchase contract gives them 2 or maybe more days. If it was written wrong, it has to be reserved as well. So, and sometimes I don't tell you that. If I'm on the side where it benefits me that you wrote it wrong, I'll tell you when I get around to it.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is walkthroughs. This is another common broker problem. If the buyers are not present for the walkthrough, they are waiving. Okay? You can go look at the repairs. And yeah, it's a little thing. If the window was broken or something, you are maybe qualified to say it's no longer broken. But if it's pool or roof or plumbing or sprinklers or at that point, if the client couldn't attend, I would send back my home inspector to check them again. But even then, the buyer has to waive. So if the buyer, because of COVID or whatever, wants to do a virtual walkthrough where you're walking through the house with your Facebook Live on, he waived his walkthrough. He did not attend the walkthrough. Okay. So, and when they waive, the buyer has 3 main rights in a purchase contract. They have the right to inspect, they have the right to repairs, and they have the right to walk through. So even though there's no request for repair waiver, when they don't make a request, I send out, I'm sure all the TCs have seen this, we write waived on there and we waive it because I want something between me and the judge when the time comes. I have documented all 3 of the buyer's rights and they waive them perhaps, because that happens too. They don't inspect, no request for repair, and they don't go to the walkthrough.
And sometimes that walkthrough needs to be done multiple times.
Yep.
You know, like right now, let's take today, you know, today and age with COVID and everything going on, things are taking longer to get things done. Lenders aren't closing on time in some cases, and whatever happens. And that final walkthrough is supposed to be done, correct me if I'm wrong, within 5 days of closing. And if for whatever reason that they go and do their final walkthrough and then the loan doesn't fund and it gets pushed back 7 days, 8 days, 10 days before they fund on it to close, the buyer ultimately should be going back to do a final walkthrough again within days of closing. Because if the buyer were to do it
The other one that,
on the 30th and they don't close until the 15th and they never went back and did another final walkthrough to make sure that everything was as it was supposed to be, they have no leg to stand on.
or doing it when they get the keys and it's already recorded and you have no way to stop the transaction to compel correction. Then we're looking at small claims, which is a whole other class for you guys somewhere down the road. These are the do's and don'ts that I preach regularly to my agents and the things that come up the most often. One of the reasons that Granite Escrow brought me over, and I talked to Tommy about this a little bit because not a lot of brokers used to do escrow and then come back to it in the manner I do. They specifically hired me to bring problem solving to your transactions. So the very first time I was ever given a manager job, I was told that because of my escrow background, I had more solutions than the average person. And so as you get to know me and my heart, and there's people on here who know me well already, I want you to call me for solutions. It doesn't have to be my escrow for me to tell you you have option A, B, and C. I'm happy to talk to anybody you need me to talk to, your broker, your escrow, whatever. I can respectfully, while not taking on additional risk, really support what's happening to you. And I joke all the time that I know millions of deals get done without me every year, but you don't have to. You can call me or Tommy, and we will jump and we will find a solution for you. Even if there's no solution, you will be sure of what your situation is. I'm ready for questions or specific situations or whatever you.
Or if there's anything else topic-wise that you think would be a great coverage, bring it up. Let's talk about it. Now it's time we're going to hear crickets. I can unmute everybody.
Okay. Oh. I was a little worried about this list because it's a long list, but it covers those important things, specifically the tenants right now. The rent backs is really important for you to hear.
And did we cover everything? Let's see. On there you had per diems, negotiating repairs,
Yes,
dual agency.
I left that off my own list. So if you don't put, as a listing agent, if you don't put your per diems in your counter offer, don't bother, because they can't be, because of trade rules, we can't fix it on the loan, and there's only one person to pay it, and that is the buyer's agent, okay? Or the seller's agent. There is nobody to pay per diems. If you put them in the contract, the lender will build them in and be ready for them. If you don't put them in the contract, it is very, very difficult. So, and the seller doesn't care. He's just like, you get me $100 a day. And very often the agent winds up eating those. In fact, 9 out of 10 times the agent winds up eating the per diem. It's because they're the only party in the transaction who has money, who can authorize a payment of something like that. So build your per diems in at the beginning of your transaction, or get used to preaching that they're uncollectible, because it is very, or if you really want to punish the other agent and you feel you've done a bad job, that may be a technique that works for you as well. But in general, per diems in the new TRID rule days cannot be thrown on at the end. It's very, very difficult.
I have a question.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on quote unquote over disclosures? Like if somebody's working a checklist and, you know, some of the language is already included in the purchase agreement, but they issue something anyways. Do you think that actually increases liability, or?
I have a general policy. So I don't think it's any sort of dereliction to tell you that there are companies that have 20 and 30 additional documents on top of the car documents. As a general rule, when I'm teaching you, I tell you to decline them. You don't want anything that says addendum to the purchase contract that isn't car protected and that you don't know the ins and outs of. So, but it is very hard, especially from the transaction coordinator point of view, to say no, because your agent has to say no. Your agent has to say, nah, we're not doing it. We need to decline it. Very often those people will say to you, oh, I'll help them out. And then at that time, you just have to do what you've been instructed to do. But as a general rule, try to avoid all of those documents to come in. You do have to know a little bit about those documents, meaning that an affiliated business statement is a legal requirement, and they must tell you they own the escrow company and the lender. 6 kinds of mold and roof and sewer and all that sort of thing. Those are documents, disclosures I call documents that were drawn by scared people. So somebody got burned somewhere and they drew that up, or they thought they could avoid being, avoid. But if it's not a car document, it's not insured. And you guys do know that car forms have a user agreement that says if the language in any of the car docs the language fails, not the way you used it, but the language fails, CAR will eat the loss and the court fees. CAR was 2 years ago, had 3 of these cases come up in the same year and won all 3 of them. So the language user guide protection is, you just try to keep it to CAR doc. So my answer is, I hate extra documents, but if pressed, I will process them.
Thank you.
So Leah had a question in the comments in regards to per diems. It said, did you say that the per diem should be attached to the RPA before it's fully executed, or in the counter offer?
You're not going to be countering your own, adding your own per diems in on the buyer side, but on the listing side, when you counter, per diems should just be part of your regular business, or get used to counseling to go without them, because they're going to be very difficult to collect at the end. And the seller will not care at that point who pays them. They will not care. Not even if it's you and you're their client, they will not care. They're fed up and they want to punish. And the person who gets punished is not the person who caused the delay, most likely.
Right.
One quick thing that before you jump into another topic, I was hoping that Mary Jane can share that article on the failed rent back.
It's on my Facebook page. I'm just going to scroll back and I'll get it to you. Tommy, you'll have to help me.
Yeah, you can send it to me. I'll get it to him.
Okay.
And then do you want to hit on negotiating repairs?
I have a standard policy as an agent myself, and when I teach my agents to deals, or if I'm coaching them or babysitting them, I will do my inspections, do my bidding, get ready for my respect for repairs, but I don't negotiate repair. In fact, I put it in my counteroffer when I'm the listing agent that I'm not negotiating repairs until the appraisal is in, period, end of story. Specifically for VAs is where this happens the most, is we now negotiated some repairs and we're going to lose, and they have to give up those repairs that I have to have. So I don't want to renegotiate price, repairs, and the credit. That just takes everybody around the bend unnecessarily. So when your appraisal is in, and by the way, you can show me the inspection. You can tell me what you think is going to be on the request for repair so that I can start getting into it if it's something. It's not that you have to keep it a secret. Just don't expect to, you should take your clients only through a difficult negotiation like that one time.
And Colleen had just had a comment that said, did you already do the multiple streams of income class?
No, Tommy and I were just working on it this morning, and then we decided to write one for agents as well. So we're in that right now. It looks, Colleen, which group are you in? Are you in the TC group, or are you in the Transaction Coordinators of California group?
I'm in both.
Okay, well, one of them is going to be on the 8th of September, and one of them is going to be later in the month. And so you'll have an opportunity to take it twice.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then I'm going to have your group leaders come on too. Samantha Markham and Lisa Ludwin, have them both come on and share their perspective on how many different ways they're making money with the knowledge that you already have.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to put one together as well that will pertain to the agents, and looking at multiple streams of income when it pertains to the real estate business. And
feel free to. I don't have an actual page. I always say that, but whatever. I have a Facebook, and I post daily all kinds of interesting things, and so feel free to friend me if you'd like to keep up on.
Which would be Mary Jane Morris.
Like the
not
cat.
just Mary Jane. Let's see. Did you say it? Okay, so that was the last question. Unless anybody has anything else they want to share, any other topics you'd like to talk about, we will open it up.
Tommy, can you get me a copy of that renter's information also?
Yes, Karen.
Thank you.
I want to remind you again to, I'm going to put my number in the chat again. I can be a real source for you, and I do it so kindly that most people are happy that I've helped after. Even the people that we have to go arm twist usually feel like they've been heard and that they've been given options, and that we come. Tommy, you had one more person ask for the in the chat. Ask for the.
That was Colleen, the transaction coordinator, I think.
Okay.
But yes, we will send it to your email there.
If there's no more questions, then I believe we've covered a good chunk of material today.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Thank you so much.
You know, a lot of these things are just everyday events for an agent. However, not always are you in full understanding of the do's and don'ts with that particular task. So, Mary Jane, you want to plug your email into the chat as well? A couple are asking for it.
It's super easy. ourproblemsolver@gmail.com. ourproblemsolver@gmail.com.
She's definitely a problem solver.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so just want to make sure in the chat that we don't have any more questions. Nope, we're good. But yeah, if anybody has anything, go ahead and raise your hand now or take yourself off mute and go ahead and ask it. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap up at the 1 hour mark, which is perfect. And then keep in mind that Mary Jane and myself and Annie, when she has time, do these Zoom and Learns every Wednesday at 12:30. So it's always a different topic. And if you have specific topics in regards to, you know, things you would like us to cover them on, throw those our way. You can reach me through tommyfortitle.com. It's TOMMY, the number 4title.com. You can reach Mary Jane at ourproblemsolver@gmail. And send in, you know, what you'd like us to cover. I think we will put one together for the whole notice to perform and stuff like that around that aspect of it.
That class is written and ready to go, Tommy, so we could go next week even on that
And
one.
why don't we go ahead and do that next week then? So next week's class will be notice to perform and demand to close wrapped up kind of in one there.
And then the other one that we should do soon is the lease options. That one's completely written and PowerPointed and ready to go as well. And it gives you the fundamentals, including what I call the magic math or the secret math of a lease option.
I say we just roll with that the next week then. And then that will kind of push us into then the following from that, we're going to do the multiple streams of income when it pertains to an agent.
I still would love for y'all to eventually hear the how to win in small claims court, because once you understand how it works, you will never again be intimidated by somebody threatening you on a contract for matters less than $10,000, which are 99% of deposits. So,
Right.
All
All right. Well, without further ado, Mary Jane, thank you so much for your knowledge drops. And again, guys, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. You have our contacts there now. And I'll also put my email in the chat there as well. And we're always here to help in any way that we can. So thank you guys for spending the afternoon or the lunch hour with us, I guess we'll say. And we hope to see you next week, same time, same place. It is the same Zoom login every week. And we go live at 12:30 every Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for your time.
right.